Half day, we're now at the Lieutenant Governor's office on Capitol Hill with Lieutenant Governor Dennis Mendiola.
Good morning, Tomas.
You know, before we started rolling, I was just acknowledging, I don't think any of us expected to be sitting here right now in this capacity.
Especially me. Tommy, it's been a really tough 2 weeks. You know, again, God rest his soul, the late lieutenant, or the late governor, God rest his soul. You know, the transition from coming from the legislative branch here has been quite a rodeo for all of us. There's a lot of emotions involved. There's a lot of transition. And again, I can't stress it enough. It's been a rodeo.
And so, like you said, it hasn't even been a month yet. And I know the focus was laying the late governor to rest. The work continues, though, as it's outlined in the Constitution and how you've ascended to this role. You've seemed to hit the ground running. I know that there are cabinet meetings taking place. Full disclosure, we're filming this on Friday, and so just tell us how you've organized your office and how you're starting to fulfill the duties of Lieutenant Governor.
Thank you for that question. So, yes, we did hit the ground running. Our priorities was to try and kind of understand where the governor left off and some of his priorities, and you know, to try and get all the cabinets in and understand, you know, some of the works that they're doing, some of the issues or the challenges that they're facing, so that, you know, when the governor and I sit down and start drawing up our priorities, you know, we can address these based on priorities and which one is most pressing today. I can tell you that the last two cabinet meeting, or our cabinet meeting, almost 3 hours long, and the cabinet meeting consisted of just every agency that, you know, falls under the executive branch, you know, giving a short briefing on where they stand on some of the activities that they're doing or their agency is working on with the late governor. So it took really long. It was a lot of information, but nonetheless, I think coming out of that cabinet meeting, we understood where we stand and, you know, what we need to kind of press forward, you know, in terms of Governor Apatang and myself. Governor Apatang's his calendar's filled, you know, with the same thing, pretty much dealing with a lot of the investors, a lot of the agencies coming in, trying to brief him on issues, you know, from major issues to, you know, budget issues. So these are some of the challenges that we face in this transitional period, you know, coming in and hitting the ground running, as you stated. It's just really trying to just understand where the administration left off, and one of the iteration that we spoke about is that, you know, there's no shifting of priorities or no revamping of any plans, not just yet. Of course, we need to understand where it's at, and, you know, make sure that when we do make the decision, it's going to be, you know, based on where we're trying to take this administration in the next year and a half.
It's no secret you and the late governor and this administration, prior to you coming in, did not see eye to eye.
Definitely.
And I know that it's been said that you can put differences aside and still respect each other. Is there anything that Lieutenant Governor Mendiola will do in this next year that maybe you advocated for on the Senate side?
So let me just address the relationship of the late governor and I. So we're always friends. We've never really, we never had a sour relationship. As a matter of fact, we speak, you know, we have private conversations where we talk about issues that face the Commonwealth. But I think one thing you can get out of my personality is that I'm going to make sure that I speak my mind and not just be a rubber stamp and just agree to everything that, you know, that comes out of, you know, whether it be the governor or lieutenant governor at the time. Being the Senate president, the role was to make sure that I advocate for the CNMI to include the municipalities, and that was the priority at the time in terms of policy. Now I'm here in the executive branch, looking at the execution of these policies and ensuring that when we provide services to our people, that it's fair and it's, across the board, on all senatorial districts, to ensure that also Rhoda and Tinian gets their fair shake. So the priority from the Senate really now is just changing from policy to execution. So now I'm gonna take that priority that I have in the Senate as the Senate President, as a senator now, and just translate it into more of execution versus policy. So that's something that you can probably get out of my office in the next year and a half, is just making sure that these policies that are coming out of the legislature is fair and it's across the board. It provides services for all 3 senatorial districts.
Right. I know the budget is probably going to get signed next week, right? That's what we're hearing. Or
I'm not sure if it will be signed next week, but I know that they're deliberating on the budget starting this week on the Senate side. Okay. So, again, it's quite interesting for me because I came from the Senate, and, given the administration's proposed budget, we didn't agree in terms of being the Senate President. So now I have to find that medium, or that happy balance, right, where we can work together and make sure that whatever the executive branch needs to operate and what the legislative branch is giving is balanced. So that's going to be my biggest advocacy. I'll be the governor's advocate to the Senate, as I hold that relationship with the Senate. So I'm going to make sure that if there's issues, that I bring it directly to the senators, and hopefully we can come into a decision that's favorable for both branches of government.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up. Is there like 1 or 2 specific policies that for sure you want to advance, or anything, any specifics right now? I know you're just getting into the role.
I don't want to talk about specific, only because I want to respect the governor. Again, I refuse to be a lone ranger here, given that this is now the governor is Governor Apateng, David Apateng. So I want to make sure that any policy that I do push out is in conformance with his ideals. I want to make sure that the governor's on board, so that we can continue that working relationship. Again, what we need more than ever now is to come together as a CNMI to work through these economic challenges. So Governor and I have committed to that, and I will respect that process.
All right, I wanted to talk about your team. Many people are wondering who is part of the team. Some familiar faces at your swearing in. We saw former Lieutenant Governor Diego Benavente. We saw former Finance Secretary David Atalig, and former Senator Vinnie Sablan. So who's a part of your team? And
they're all a part of my team.
Yeah, can you tell us what their roles are? I know many are curious.
So right now there's no specifics in terms of former Lieutenant Governor Diego Benavente, Secretary David Atalig, or former Secretary of Finance Dave Atalig. But I'm soliciting everybody's, expertise. At this point, we're gonna need everybody's. The more brain power we have when we're talking about financial matter of the CNMI, I think the better off the decision is going to be. But I can say that one of the core personnel that I brought on board is former Senator Vinnie Sablan. He is now my chief of staff. I work well with him. We have a great working relationship. I can trust in his decision-making abilities. So I brought him in as the chief of staff, and from there we're going to start building our team under the Lieutenant Governor's office.
I want to follow up with all due respect. Okay, sure. I'm asking this with the utmost respect.
Sure.
There are those who see the familiar faces, and the type of campaign that Aloysius Apateng ran about rebuilding trust.
Sure.
And some of the individuals were part of the previous administration who received some of the blame for what has transpired in the economy. Sure. That's up for debate, right?
Okay.
Right. I'm not here to point fingers. But what would you say to residents who say that the people who might have contributed to whatever they believe is the cause to some negative aspects of government are back now with you?
Yeah.
Do you want to respond to that?
So when I look at an individual, I look at them based on their qualification, their strength, their skill. I'm not gonna make decisions based on what people like and dislike. I think if we go down that road, we can never come to an exact answer or a conclusion on any issue that we're deliberating on, because again, it depends on who you ask, right? The individual is great with one individual, and another individual may say this individual is the worst person. So for me, I don't want to entertain that. I think the rebuilding trust should rest on the decision maker, which is myself, you know. So for this to actually be a solidified decision, I have to make sure that the information is adequate. And how do you get adequate information? You get subject matter experts that are actually, they know the subject at hand. And then you get those, and then you deliberate on that, right? So for me, that's how I take this role. If I'm, like I said, if I'm gonna sit here and kind of, you know, think about what everybody has said about everybody, we're never gonna move forward, because, you know, I myself is not favorable in some individuals. You know, I'm not, you know, an individual's cup of tea, but should that stop me from doing my fiduciary responsibility? Absolutely not. So, you know, everybody's entitled to their opinion, and I respect it. I'm not against it, but when I make decisions, it's going to be according to what's, the full context of, whatever subject's at hand. So that's where I stand with this.
Yeah, thank you for answering that. I know those were some of the initial comments that were received when. I've seen it, I've heard it, and I understand. I understand people's dismay. Again, like I said, depending on where you stand on the information, there's people that are with the information, with the individual, and there's people that are not. But I respect that. Again, just I want to rest assured, to everybody that is watching this, that the decision that's going to come out of my office is really going to be based on the decision that I make, and not anybody's personal interest or any of that nature. So all right, and speaking of decisions, there's a big decision that's going to happen in another year. That's another election.
Sure.
I hate to ask, I don't know when to ask, but this is on people's minds, right?
Sure.
About whether or not you're going to run. Perhaps will there be a Vinnie Sablan, Dennis Mendiola ticket? What do you say to those to people curious about your political future after this term expires?
I love the question, and I'm honestly not going to root it out. Like, for me, at this point, I'm here now, and I'm in this seat. So when it comes time to make the decision to be, let's say, the lieutenant governor, whether it be Vinnie Sablan, because there's so many rumors, right? There's Ralph Torres, there's, of course, there was the late governor at the time, right? For me, now sitting in this seat, fast forward a year from now, if there's any time to make that decision, now would be the time for me. Why? Because I'm sitting in the seat, right? So whether I become somebody's running mate, now that's going to be up to the Republican Party, of course, right? I'm not going to jump ahead of that. I'm going to allow the process to take its course, and depending on where the people, of the party stand and who they want, I'm going to respect that process. But do I have aspiration? Absolutely. Is there a probability? I wouldn't count it out.
So just to wrap up the interview, you just have a year left. I mean, what are you outlining after you've met everyone, after you've, like you said, set the priorities with the governor? What do the next few months look like? How are you approaching the next year? So
it's really, for me, for starters, I need to go and understand a lot of these agencies' challenges, and I'm going to be that voice for the agencies. I want to use my next year as trying to advocate so that we can provide better services for our people. That's at least at the basic, in terms of fiduciary responsibility. That's what I want to do in this next year. We still need to meet with the government agencies and make sure that we get to understand a lot of these challenges, and from there we can craft up the priorities on what's pressing and what's the most important and what's the least important. Of course, everybody's issue is important, but given the financial state of the CNMI, we're going to have to kind of juggle finances around to make sure that we address those issues that, you know, our people are in dire need of. So for me, the next year and a half, that'll be the priority. That at least at the basic, that should be my priority.
All right, Lieutenant Governor Mendiola, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate your transparency and you answering my questions. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Tomas.